Hi, I'm Jason Gore for ThatShelf.com. We're here to talk about Matthew Rankin's Universal Language, playing here at the 2024 Cannes International Film Festival.
ThatShelf.
So Universal Language is a film that I sort of went into Cannes loving a lot. I had a chance to see a pre-screening thanks to the distributor in Canada. And it's one of those things, it's like you see it first and you're like, am I really seeing something truly great here? Or am I simply so excited to actually be coming to Cannes that I'm going to be sort of jumping on the first thing you see, you know, that usual stuff. But I have the advantage here of actually having had weeks now to actually sort of have the film run in mind. I've now seen dozens and dozens of other films, and still this one sticks with me. For those that don't know, Matthew Rankin is this, I guess technically sort of Montreal-based, Winnipeg-bred filmmaker. He did 20th Century, which played TIFF, and made a bit of a splash, especially for people that really liked the sort of somewhere between, I don't know, Fritz Lang and David Lynchian version of our Canadian political history. It was very surreal. It was very stylized. I liked it a lot. I liked the ideas behind it. I liked the look of it. It didn't hit me emotionally in the way. It felt more, I felt more the experiment than I felt the film itself. I liked it, and I was excited to see what they would do next. And what they did next just blew me away. I think Universal Language is phenomenal. I've gone on record already thinking that it should be Canada's Oscar nomination for Best Foreign Language Film, or International Language, or whatever they're calling it these days. I think this is an astonishingly smart film that superficially feels silly, and I love it for that. Story-wise, it's this alternate universe where Farsi is the dominant language of Winnipeg. Louis Riel is on the currency. A bunch of kids are in a French immersion class. And turkeys roam the streets and are thought of in sexualized ways, and also occasionally steal pairs of glasses. What are you going to do with that? I've been describing it. There's obviously a Wes Andersonian nature to it. It's inevitable to actually draw that because of how precisely it's actually designed, how glorious the production design actually works out. He shoots Winnipeg like it's an apocalyptic hellhole, and yet weirdly inviting and community-like. I was reminded of Denis Villeneuve's way that he shot Toronto in Enemy, that absolutely made my city never look as awful as it did when he shoots these incredible angles at Scarborough's U of T campus. This brutalist architecture just being seen as just dire and awful. Winnipeg is just seen as a series of bland brick buildings, but the angles, the triangulation that he actually takes on is fantastic. It just gives you this sense of otherworldliness to a place which is, you know, really quite beautiful city. But by doing this, it is absolutely a love letter to how ridiculous sometimes Winnipeg is and feels. I would be remiss if not saying the words Guy Mack. Because if you're talking about Winnipeg weirdos, he's the king of Winnipeg weirdos. Also here at Cannes with Rumors. We'll talk about that film at another date. But Rankin has taken some of that Winnipeg weirdo-ness and taken it slightly askew. Has done so in a way that feels simply different. It's a unique voice. This is by no means a clone of what has been done before. And it's very fascinating, again, not to go too much on, that Rumors leans heavily into Neil Young, who was Toronto-born and then sort of made his bones in Winnipeg before heading out again. But how Winnipeg is universal language. It is bringing Guess Who and These Eyes in Farsi and in English to the Quezette, and I love it for that. The performances are great. The writing is great. If stories are to be believed, and I'm just choosing to believe it, Matthew Rankin himself spent 3 years learning to read and write Farsi. Wrote the film with 2 of his collaborators. Directed the film, stars in the film, and narrative-wise, it's the story of a couple kids who are sort of on a quest. You have a tour guide who's showing the beauties of Winnipeg, the Louis Riel statue that's sort of at a highway exit ramp. You have teachers in the immersion school, and then you have Matthew himself, who's going home to visit his mother, who has left a job in the Quebec bureaucracy to go do so. Now, we've seen a lot of, big flashy shots before, but universal language has my favorite 180 in cinema history. I'm hands down. The camera is cutting absolutely in a Kubrickian 180 line, dead center, and the production design just shifts, the desk shifts back and forth. And it is people talk about, not to rant about another Cannes movie, people talk about that feeling of disjointedness when Godard in Goodbye to Language did the 3D thing, and it was the sort of one eye was doing one thing and one eye was doing the other. And I, who've tested television before, had seen that effect. On Disney Disc, you actually see, is it Mickey in one eye and Pluto or whomever on the other eye? It's just like, what? It was, for me, a cheap parlor trick. This 180 I found so both disjointed and exhilarated at the same time. I felt like in this one silly shot, I was seeing something both incredibly old and brand goddamn new. I love it so much. And it is if this is what counts as showy, this is what counts as like, we're gonna have some fun here. It's not a 20-minute wonder on a crane shot. It's a 180 reversal inside a little studio. And yet at some point in time, you just have to recognize the joy in that composition. It has never made me feel Quebec bureaucracy at its purest and most awful form. I've said it repeatedly. Montreal is my favorite city in my country, but I could never live there. I love visiting it, but I could never deal with all the nonsense. I lived in France for a year, that was enough. Quebec bureaucracy is a whole nother level of silliness. And this film, again, in a loving way, in an understanding way, just shows its like utter and total bleakness, and it's exquisite. The story is lovely. The characters are warm. Even when they do things that are not necessarily positive, you kind of understand why they do them. And everything sort of interlocks in a way which is incredibly satisfying. As I said, I have a feeling that lots and lots of people will actually watch this film and think, oh, that's a fun little trifle. But this is a deeply thought out film about the stories we tell, to use another title from a very famous Canadian film, about Canadian multiculturalism, about how we get along, about language and its form of forming our identity, about what counts as Canadian, about who counts as Canadian, and about how we can go beyond our presumptions, our prejudices, and all those other elements, and actually find things that who would have ever found, again, the weird, if not sexualization, at least romanticization of the turkey, of the box of Kleenex, of these other things that just feel perfectly in keeping with the world that is created here. And this was what is fantastic about it. We talk about this in sci-fi films all the time. You're like, does it play by its own rules? Does what is set out sort of fulfill its promise? And what's great about universal language, it is never, ever weird for weird's sake. It is not just throwing shit on the wall and seeing what sticks. This is so carefully and beautifully realized for you to be engaged and care, because it has engaged and it has proven what you should care about. That for me is what makes this film truly special. Because I knew I was going to see bonkers stuff here. I've written at length already about how weird this can is. A bunch of filmmakers just deciding to go for it. And yet this one does so with a level of heart and a level of just sheer joy, cinematic joy, just reveling in the fact that stories get to be told, that I can't help but celebrate it with the equal love that in return. Matthew Rankin's Universal Language is one of the great films of Cannes, maybe one of the great films of the year, and I'm ecstatic that it's gotten the attention it's deserved. As I said, I've been going on about it repeatedly for a couple weeks now. It won the Audience Award, the inaugural Audience Award here at the Directors Fortnight. Nothing would have pleased me more to play in competition, but I think in some ways this allows it a little bit more space, a little less negative, overt scrutiny for it to grow. I look forward to seeing it on its journey on the festival circuit, and I really, really, really hope that audiences, especially in Canada, where we do not celebrate films like this nearly enough, and where there aren't mechanisms for us to actually see this film with a crowd in the way we would want, I really hope that there is universal praise, or at least universal acceptance, universal going out to the goddamn movie theater and seeing Universal Language. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, do all that other stuff. We will see you next video. All the best. Take care.
Senf.